Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Joseph Palczinski? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I will put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case. I'll move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Joseph Palczinski was born on November 11, 1968. When he was 14 years old, he sustained a head injury when a school bus he was riding in slammed into another bus in a parking lot. He started having behavioral problems. He would become angry out of nowhere, fly into a rage. He would bite and scratch anyone who was within reach, and he would scream threats at them. He was diagnosed with post-traumatic psychotic episode. His mother sued the Baltimore County school system, but did not prevail. I guess buses slamming into one another was just business as usual. Over a span of 13 years, Joseph committed a number of crimes and spent time in prison and in mental health facilities. Several of his crimes were in the context of romantic relationships. Joseph was very successful at attracting romantic partners. He was described as polite and charming. Joseph regularly had sports cars, which also helped him with his love life. His relationships would start out fine, but then his attitude would drastically change. Joseph strongly preferred dating high schoolers. All of his victims, except for one, were between the ages of 15 and 17. In 1987, Joseph attacked a love interest and held her captive. The next year, he struck and threatened a romantic partner. Joseph was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but only served 2 years, even with time being added for multiple escape attempts. He was released in April 1991, but in November, he pushed and threatened another victim. He was given a mental health evaluation in jail and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. He escaped on December 16, 1991. On January 17, 1992, Joseph barricaded himself into an apartment in Idaho. 16 hours later, a tear gas-induced resolution was realized. Joseph was returned to jail in Maryland. He was released after receiving a mental health assessment, which determined that he was not mentally ill. Joseph went back to his old ways. In December 1995, he physically attacked and threatened a girlfriend. He then convinced a new girlfriend to make false claims against the former girlfriend's father. Joseph eventually pleaded guilty to witness intimidation and battery. In 1996, Joseph started dating another love interest. He told her that he had some bad stuff in his background, but she really liked him and was impressed that he drove a sports car. As usual, this relationship ended with Joseph being violent. He was sent to prison and released in June 1998. Joseph started dating a 20-year-old woman named Tracy Whitehead after meeting her in a grocery store. She was the oldest person he had ever dated. Tracy had only been in one serious relationship before. She was inexperienced at romance. She fell in love with Joseph. A few months later, they rented a place together. He purchased her a $2,000 diamond ring and brought her flowers frequently. It didn't take long for Joseph to behave badly. He was quick to anger. Anything could send him into a rage, even somebody throwing a pillow at him. He was also extremely jealous. Joseph would slap and punch Tracy. He claimed that it was the bipolar disorder that caused him to behave this way. Tracy stayed with Joseph because she believed her life was better with him, and she viewed him as very generous. In March of 2000, Tracy had enough of Joseph's violence. She left the residence they shared and filed charges against him. She moved into the apartment of a married couple, George and Gloria Schenk, who were 49 and 50 years old, respectively. Tracy was an assistant manager at a retail store, and Gloria was her boss. George and Gloria knew that Joseph was dangerous. They were trying to keep Tracy safe from him. Joseph was arrested on March 4. He posted a $7,500 bond the next day and was released. On March 6, he convinced a neighbor to buy him a rifle and a shotgun. She was later charged with a crime. On March 7, Joseph showed up at the apartment where Tracy was staying. He said he just wanted to talk. Tracy declined to speak with him. He returned 2 hours later. This time he shot and killed Gloria and George. As he was taking Tracy from the apartment, a 42-year-old neighbor named David Myers confronted him. Joseph shot and killed him as well. He put Tracy in his vehicle, and they drove to a wooded area. He placed a ring on her finger and asked her to marry him, although he admitted the timing wasn't ideal, given the triple murder he just committed and everything. On March 8, after a full day in the woods, Joseph decided they needed to go to a motel. He attempted a carjacking, but was not successful. During the attempt, he discharged his weapon. A bullet ricocheted and struck a 36-year-old woman named Jennifer Lynn McDonald, killing her. He then carjacked an 81-year-old woman and drove her vehicle to a cheap motel in Baltimore County. Joseph did not take his firearms into the motel room. I guess they had a policy against it, and he wouldn't want to break the law. When he watched the news, he realized that the police were looking for the vehicle he carjacked. He took Tracy back out to the vehicle to retrieve his weapons. As they were doing this, Tracy noticed a police cruiser in the parking lot. An officer had responded to an unrelated call. She ran to the officer. Seeing this, Joseph fled the area and eventually made it to Virginia. On March 10, Joseph kidnapped a man named William Terrell and forced him to drive him back to Baltimore County. After making William purchase various survival equipment for him, Joseph let him go. William was unharmed. For 7 days, there was no sign of Joseph. The police had barricades set up and were frantically searching for him. On March 17, Joseph somehow made it through a police barrier and approached the house of Lynn Whitehead, Tracy's mother. Lynn lived in the house with her boyfriend Andrew McCord and their 12-year-old son Bradley McCord. Bradley didn't understand that Joseph was dangerous and let him in the house. Joseph took the family hostage. At some point, Andrew called 911. The police took over the entire neighborhood. The Baltimore County Tactical Squad entered the house 2 doors away from Joseph. There they encountered an unarmed dog who would not stop barking. They shot and killed the dog, believing it would give away their position. So the barking dog would give away their position, but the gunshot would not. Was this neighborhood really so bad that Joseph would hear a gunshot and think, oh, that's normal, but he would hear a dog barking and think, oh no, the police are here. Evidently, the police were unfamiliar with the concept of picking up a dog and carrying it out of a house. During the standoff, Joseph demanded to speak to Tracy, but the police would not allow it. They were worried that he would kill her mother when he was on the phone with Tracy. On March 19, Joseph fired shots from the home at armored police vehicles. On March 21, in the evening, about 97 hours into the standoff, Lynn and Andrew put 2 Xanax pills in a glass of iced tea and served it to Joseph. After he fell asleep, Lynn and Andrew escaped the house, leaving their son Bradley behind. The tactical team now felt as though they had no choice but to breach the house. Once inside, they confronted Joseph. He reached for a weapon, and the police opened fire. They shot him 27 times. Joseph did not survive. Now moving to my analysis. Here are my thoughts on a few items that stood out to me in this case. Item number 1, Joseph had a lot of attention from the criminal justice system. Between the time when he finished high school and when he was shot to death by the police, he had spent all but 10 months in prison, on probation, or in mental health facilities. Not every judge believed that Joseph should have been treated with such leniency. For example, in 1996, a judge said, quote, "This man is dangerous. He is out there hurting people. I can't believe any human being can make so many mistakes and be given so many chances and not appreciate it. And I do not feel, from what I hear, that the mental state is anywhere near as much an excuse as he tries to use it for a crutch," unquote. Item number 2, Joseph frequently bragged about being able to manipulate mental health professionals and judges. He was largely correct in his assessment of his own abilities. In order to appear as though he was delusional, Joseph told clinicians that ninjas were trying to kill him and voices were giving him commands. Joseph was once found not guilty on federal weapons charges because a clinician concluded he was legally insane. Just 15 months after this, Another clinician said that Joseph was extremely stable and exhibited no bizarre behavior or verbalizations. There was no sign of delusional thinking or hallucinations. He was no longer a threat to anybody. Item number 3, Joseph was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but it's not clear if he really suffered from that condition. At other times, Joseph was diagnosed with schizophrenia, depression, and antisocial personality disorder with borderline features. Some clinicians believed he was free from any mental illness. Based on the available evidence, the antisocial with borderline features theory appears to make the most sense. On the borderline side, Joseph idealized his romantic partners, then devalued them. He had a fear of rejection and an unstable sense of self. On the antisocial side, Joseph was manipulative, deceptive, charming, sensation-seeking, impulsive, and irresponsible. The antisocial characteristics facilitated the frustration and fear from the borderline traits to become violence. It allowed the borderline characteristics to be expressed in the worst possible way. There was no limit on the devaluation. Joseph didn't have any empathy to prevent him from causing great harm and even death. Joseph was generally able to function well when he was not committing crimes. He appeared to be far too organized to be suffering from schizophrenia, and he did not have negative symptoms like avolition. He deliberately faked having hallucinations and delusions because he knew that would lead to leniency. Joseph may have been depressed at times, but the symptoms did not explain his violent behavior. It's not clear how Joseph's head injury fit with his mental health situation. Head injuries typically don't cause someone to develop antisocial personality features, but it's hard to ignore the timing of his head injury and the misconduct. There does seem to be some type of connection there. Perhaps the head injury affected his impulse control, which allowed his other antisocial characteristics to become more pronounced. Item number 4, some people look at this case and cannot understand how Joseph was able to find so many romantic partners. There are a few reasons Joseph was successful in this area. He targeted female high school students who were inexperienced with romance. He told people he was several years younger than he really was. He lifted weights and studied martial arts. He was in good physical condition. He drove sports cars like a Ford Mustang and a Nissan 300ZX, and he was polite, charming, and generous in the early stages of the relationship. Joseph was also successful, at least initially, in preventing his victims from filing charges. He did this by being extremely intimidating and threatening. He took his romantic partners by surprise with how quickly he could change his mood. He also recruited other romantic partners to fabricate stories to help him. One of the reasons several of his victims eventually filed charges against him was that he would not stay away from them. If he had left them alone after his initial attack, he would have been arrested fewer times. Item number 5, looking at the nature of Joseph's crimes, there is this idea that he did not understand the consequences of his behavior. However, there is evidence available which suggests that he did. Joseph diligently attempted to avoid taking responsibility for his various offenses and appeared to understand the potential penalties he was facing. A few examples: he had his mother contact his victims and tell them not to file charges. Joseph recruited one of his romantic interests to file false charges against the father of one of his victims. The police arrested the father, but later the charges were dismissed. When Joseph was in the vehicle with William, the man he kidnapped but did not murder, he told William that he expected to be killed by the police. This was not the first time Joseph made this prediction. Sometime before this, he said he would die by a bullet. One could argue that the accuracy level of Joseph's prediction could be expressed as the fraction 1/27, which brings me to item number 6. Some people believe that it was overkill for the tactical team to shoot Joseph 27 times. I think this happened because 2 of the officers were carrying Heckler & Koch MP5 9mm submachine guns. These are fully automatic and were equipped with 30-round magazines. It wasn't like the officers pulled the triggers of their weapons 27 times in total. Another concern here is that Joseph was unarmed. This is true, but he was reaching for a gun, and he had proven many times that he would use it. Based on what is known in this case, I believe the officers did what they had to do. Item number 7. Some people are critical of the police because Joseph was able to access the house of Lynn Whitehead. I think this was a failure on the part of the police. They claim that Lynn and Andrew declined their protection, but the police should have known not to give them a choice. It seems fairly obvious that Tracy's mother would have been a potential target for Joseph. Item number 8. Some people have been critical of Lynn Whitehead and Andrew McCord for leaving their 12-year-old son Bradley McCord asleep on the kitchen floor as they escaped from Joseph. As I understand it, they were concerned that Bradley would make noise when they woke him up, which almost certainly would have resulted in Joseph shooting all of them. They felt as though the police were better equipped to save Bradley. I think it's hard to fault anybody in this situation. Even a few moments of being with Joseph would be incredibly stressful. They were with him for about 97 hours. I think these two are actually heroes for incapacitating Joseph and making it safer for the police to enter. Now moving to my final thoughts. Like many disasters, the outcome in this case was generated by a combination of unfortunate circumstances, specifically borderline and antisocial traits, probably mixed with some type of head injury. It created an individual who could not be bargained with, who did not respect limits, and who would do anything to get his way. In addition to this pernicious profile, Joseph was a master of manipulation, coercion, and intimidation. He was functional in all the areas that made him dangerous, and dysfunctional in those areas that would have made him safe. Those are my thoughts in the case of Joseph Palczinski. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be informative. Thanks for watching.